Hi, I'm Jamie Smart. Welcome to the podcast. And in this brief clip from one of my advanced programs, we're going to be diving into the intriguing answer to a question one of my clients asked around how do you explain to someone the truth of who they really are? And as you're going to discover, this question holds one of the keys to deep transformational coaching impact. So I hope you really enjoy the episode.
When guiding a client toward their true identity, what words do you use? How do you explain to someone who they truly are?
What a great question. So I'm gonna tell you something, but what I tell you isn't how I explain it, it's what I do. So I'm gonna
Okay.
tell you what I do, and then I'm gonna invite you to reflect on whether that gives you any clues about how to explain it. But the first thing I'll say is that in my experience, explanations of it don't do people any good. The first thing I'm going to do with my client is I'm going to teach them how to listen, right? Because the way they're going to get a glimpse of who they really are is going to be through an insight that they have. So it's something, here's my assertion is that everyone has an innate capacity for insight, and that's a profoundly practical spiritual tool. One of the things it does is for all of us, it allows us to get a glimpse of the world and make a model of the world. It allows us to walk and talk, that capacity for insight. It allows us to create a model of reality that we use as our way of getting around, right? So, and we're always updating that model. And so that innate capacity for insight allows us to enhance our understanding of reality in the face of a dynamically changing world, right? Like the world is always changing. And the thing about any map of reality is it's fixed. Like the world is alive, but our maps are dead. They're concepts, right? They're ideas. They're like a cookie that's already been baked. It's not alive, hopefully, unless you leave it too long on the side. But yeah, so that's the very thing I'll do with my clients is the very thing I'm doing here with you, which is I'm saying, yeah, anything I'm saying, because the stuff I'm saying is concepts and ideas, but they're dead. Whereas the realization into the truth of your being, that's alive. That's a living truth. That's a spiritual fact. So we have this innate capacity for insight, which is the source of every realization you've ever had in your whole life. And me too, right? Like that, an innate capacity. It's there in everyone. It's there in me. It's there in you. It's there in everyone here. It's there in all our clients. And that innate capacity has a very specific job. Its job is to bring our embodied understanding of reality more closely into alignment with actual reality. So that's a constant updating job. You know how Microsoft or Windows, they're always saying, you've got 3 new updates because they keep the software up to date. Well, your innate capacity for insight is constantly doing its best to keep your software up to date with a dynamically changing world. And so one of the things that it's possible for a human being to have realizations about is how experience is created. And another thing that it's possible for someone to have a realization about is who they really are. So this innate capacity for insight, when it's pointed at our spiritual nature, we can catch a glimpse of that for ourselves. So here's where I'm going to land the plane. You've heard me tell this story before, I expect, but I'll tell it again anyway, which is I was chatting with Jan Chipman, who's a dear friend and mentor. And she and I both share a love of listening to Syd Banks recordings. And I asked her what it is she loves about him. And she said, well, the reason I love listening to Syd's recordings is he just makes it so easy for you to listen to who you really are. And I thought that was just such a perfect description. And then I realized that for me, my job as a clarity coach, you could say, is to the best of my ability to become a mirror that allows my client to catch a glimpse of who you really are. And the only way you can do that is by falling awake to the truth of that yourself. So if you want to be a mirror who can wake others up to the truth of who they really are, you need to reside in that place in you. And it's never guaranteed. Like, it's guaranteed that if you're hanging out in that place in you, then that gives them a good chance of catching a glimpse of it in them. But you never know. You never know. When I first came across this understanding, fairly early in the game, I was kind of like, oh, you need to become a connoisseur of connection. Because that feeling of connection is the feeling of remembering who you really are. Okay. So you want to become fascinated with the feeling of connection and learn to savor it, to hang out there, to become comfortable with it, and to luxuriate in that feeling of connection, like I'm doing right now. And here's the funny thing, when you're doing that with a client, if they're kind of sped up and stuff, it'll be irritating for them. But what I'll do when I'm working with someone at first, if we're working one-on-one or something, I'll go in and out of it. I'll have normal speed conversations and that sort of thing, and tell stories and that sort of thing. And then we'll drop into that feeling, and then we'll come out and back in and out and back in. And over time, they kind of get used to it. So one way of thinking about it is you're training your client to develop a feel for the feeling of connection.